My name is Anya Petrova. I'm 36 years old, and what I do for a living is difficult to explain at dinner parties. I'm a senior partner at a firm that specializes in corporate crisis negotiation. It's a world of high-stakes contracts, intellectual property disputes, and hostile takeovers that sometimes turn genuinely hostile. My brother, Mikhail, and I grew up under the same roof in a small town nestled in the Cascade foothills of Washington, but the paths we chose might as well have been on different planets. He builds things with his hands. I build arguments with my words. He finds solace under a canopy of ancient pines. I find it in the quiet hum of a boardroom after a successful resolution. That night, as my car sliced through the rain-swept darkness of the Cascade Loop Highway, I was on my way to what felt like the most critical negotiation of my career. The fate of TerraGen Innovations, a visionary clean energy company, and the life of its founder's son, Ivan, hung in the balance. I never expected to see the rhythmic pulse of red and blue lights bloom in my rearview mirror. I certainly never imagined my own brother would be the one to place his hands on me, not in comfort, but in cold, professional restraint, while the clock was ticking on a young man's life. Before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you what came before. Because the deepest cracks don't happen in an instant, they are the result of 1,000 tiny, hairline fractures over time. Our childhood home smelled of sawdust and old books. Dad was a master carpenter, a man who believed in the truth of a plumb line and the integrity of a well-made joint. Mom was a librarian, a woman who found magic in the Dewey Decimal System and believed a well-structured sentence could change the world. They were good, loving parents, but they loved us in different languages. Mikhail, who is 5 years my senior, spoke Dad's language. From the time he was small, he was at Dad's side, learning to measure twice and cut once, learning the grain of different woods, the heft of a hammer. He was solid, dependable, a physical presence in the world. He taught me how to patch a bike tire, how to build a fire in the damp woods, how to find the North Star. I adored him with the fierce, uncomplicated loyalty of a little sister. I, on the other hand, was my mother's child. While Mikhail was in the workshop, I was in the library, devouring stories and histories, my mind alight with worlds far beyond our small town. Academics were my sanctuary, a place where I felt competent and strong. While Mikhail wrestled with algebra, I soared through it. I saw the quiet frustration in his eyes when Mom would hang my report cards on the refrigerator, a constellation of perfect grades, while his, respectable but not stellar, would be acknowledged with a gentle pat on the shoulder and "You're trying your best. Sweetie, that's what matters." "Not everyone is built for books, Anya," Dad would say, a hint of defensiveness in his tone as he watched Mikhail plane a piece of cedar. "Some people are built to make things you can actually touch. Things that last." It wasn't a criticism of me, not directly, but it drew a line in the sand. The tangible versus the intangible. The doer versus the thinker. By 18, Mikhail knew exactly who he was. He joined the county sheriff's department, following a path not of family tradition, but of personal conviction. He wanted to protect the forests and the community he loved. At his graduation from the academy, Dad's pride was immense. He built Mikhail a custom gun cabinet from reclaimed oak, a piece so beautiful it was more art than furniture. "A man needs a place for his tools," Dad had said, clapping Mikhail on the back. I was 13 then, already dreaming of a different kind of life. My path led me to Stanford, then to Harvard Law. Each acceptance, each accolade, felt like another step away from the world Mikhail and Dad inhabited. While Mikhail was patrolling the winding mountain roads of Cedar Creek County, I was interning in the glass and steel canyons of New York City. The first real Fisher appeared when I was 26, an associate at a top-tier law firm. I called home, ecstatic about a particularly complex case I had won. "A corporation saved some money on a patent dispute?" Mikhail had said over the phone, his voice flat. "Great. I pulled a family out of their car after they went over an embankment on Highway 2 yesterday. They're all alive." The line went quiet. There was no comparison, and yet he had made one. My career was a steep, relentless ascent. I found my niche in the high-pressure world of crisis negotiation, where my ability to think 3 steps ahead and read the unspoken emotions in a room was a powerful asset. I made junior partner at 30, senior partner at 34. I bought a minimalist condo in Seattle with a view of Puget Sound, a world of polished concrete and floor-to-ceiling windows. The last time I'd spoken to Mikhail, before that night on the highway, was at our parents' 40th anniversary party, 6 months prior. I had just finalized a deal that saved a historic Seattle-based company from a hostile foreign takeover, a story that had made the local business journals. "Must be nice," Mikhail had said, swirling the beer in his bottle. "Sitting in your ivory tower, moving millions around on a screen. Probably feels real important." "Mikhail," Mom had warned, her voice tight. "It's fine, Mom," I'd said, forcing a smile. "What I do is important, Mikhail. It saves jobs. It protects people's life's work." "Right," he'd scoffed. "People's work. Not like the work of clearing a rockslide so people can get home to their families, or finding a lost hiker before they freeze to death. That's just manual labor, I guess." He was a sergeant by then, a respected and capable deputy, but in his eyes, I could see he still felt like the boy whose report card never made it to the fridge. He saw my success not as my own achievement, but as a judgment on his. The silence between us had stretched for 6 months. I sent a birthday text that went unanswered. Mom would give me brief updates. Mikhail was doing well. He was leading a new wilderness search and rescue training program. He was quiet. Which brings me to that rainy Tuesday night. My phone had buzzed with the encrypted alert from my firm. TerraGen Innovations, a family-owned tech company on the verge of a revolutionary breakthrough in tidal energy, was in crisis. A disgruntled former partner, backed by a ruthless competitor, had taken the founder's son, Ivan, hostage at their remote R&D facility on a small island in the Sound. The demand wasn't money. It was the intellectual property, the culmination of a decade of work, a technology that could genuinely change the world for the better. The deadline was 3 a.m. If founder Dmitry Volkov didn't sign over the patents, his son would be harmed and the prototype destroyed. Every minute was a lifetime. The mission was silent, no police involvement yet at the client's request. My job was to get there, establish contact, and de-escalate before anyone got hurt and before a transformative technology was lost forever. So when I saw those flashing lights, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated frustration. I was in Mikhail's jurisdiction, a fact I'd noted with a fleeting sense of irony as I'd passed the "Welcome to Cedar Creek County" sign. I assumed I'd flash my credentials, explain the urgency in vague but authoritative terms, and be on my way. I had no idea I was about to collide with 6 months of silence and a lifetime of resentment. I had no idea my own brother would look at me as if I were a stranger, a threat, and in doing so, risk everything we both held dear. I eased my sleek, dark sedan onto the gravel shoulder of the Cascade Loop. The rain fell in a steady, hypnotic rhythm, drumming against the roof and tracing silver paths down the windows. In the rearview mirror, the police cruiser's lights painted the wet asphalt in frantic strokes of red and blue. A lone figure emerged, silhouetted against the glare, pulling the collar of his uniform jacket against the downpour. 3 minutes. That's what I told myself. A 3-minute delay was acceptable. Manageable. I had my corporate ID and a letter from my firm authorizing emergency travel ready on the passenger seat. I powered down the window as the beam of a heavy-duty flashlight cut through the gloom, momentarily washing out my vision. "License and registration, ma'am." The voice was low, professional, and utterly familiar. My heart didn't just drop, it plummeted. As my eyes adjusted, the flashlight beam lowered, and I was looking at the face of my brother, Mikhail. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat, carving clean lines through the road dust on his cheeks. Recognition flickered in his eyes, but it was immediately chased by something else, something guarded and hard. Anya. The name was a flat statement of fact, stripped of any warmth. "Mikhail," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Listen, I'm in the middle of a time-critical situation. A corporate crisis. I really need to keep moving." He didn't step back. Instead, He leaned slightly against my door, his presence a solid, unmoving barrier. You were doing 85 and a 60. That's not just a ticket, Anya. That's reckless driving. I'm aware of my speed, I said, trying to keep the impatience from my voice. As I said, it's an emergency. There's a life or death negotiation I have to get to. I don't have time for this. The word negotiation seemed to annoy him. His jaw clenched. The CEO of a coffee company having a bad day doesn't constitute a life or death emergency out here. License and registration, please. I took a slow, calming breath. This wasn't about the law. This was about us. Mikhail, I am formally telling you, as a private citizen in an exigent circumstance, that I am en route to prevent a violent crime from occurring. My presence is required. Every minute we spend here puts someone at risk. License and registration, he repeated, his voice a monotone. His face was a mask of detached procedure, a look I'd seen him practice for years until it became second nature. Resigned, I reached for my wallet and the letter from my firm. Here is my driver's license. And this letter, I said, handing it to him, explains the nature of my work and requests professional courtesy from local authorities in a crisis. I need to be at the Anacortes ferry terminal in less than an hour. He took the documents, his flashlight beam lingering on the embossed letterhead of Petrova and Sterling. Petrova and Sterling, he read aloud, a faint, bitter smile touching his lips. Sounds very important. You think this fancy paper makes you special, Anya? Above the rules that apply to everyone else. The words were a direct hit, aimed with years of practice. This isn't about being special. It's about a 20-year-old kid named Ivan Volkov who is being held against his will. His life is in my hands. Step out of the vehicle, please. The command was so out of proportion to the situation that I could only stare at him. What? Mikhail, this is absurd. You know who I am. Step out of the vehicle. Now. This time, his hand moved, not to his weapon, but to the radio on his shoulder, a silent threat of escalating the situation. I felt a hot surge of anger, but I tamped it down. Logic, not emotion, was my tool. I am going to reach for my phone to call my partner, Mr. Sterling. He can verify the gravity of this situation for you. Keep your hands where I can see them, Mikhail said, his voice sharp. And then, to my utter disbelief, his hand went to his hip, and he unholstered his service weapon, holding it in a low, ready position. He didn't point it at me, not yet, but the message was clear. My breath caught in my throat. This was no longer a traffic stop. This was something dark and twisted. Mikhail, put the gun away. This is a gross overreach of your authority, and you know it. This is not procedure for a speeding ticket. Exit the vehicle with your hands visible, he commanded, his voice devoid of any emotion, as if he were speaking to a hardened criminal, not the sister who had once helped him cram for his history exams. I knew I had no choice. Escalating this physically would only make it worse. I slowly opened the car door and stepped out into the rain, raising my hands. The wind whipped my hair around my face. This is a colossal mistake, and you know it, I said, my voice low and intense. I am unarmed. I am not a threat. Turn around. Place your hands on the vehicle. Mikhail, listen to me. Ivan Volkov. TerraGen Innovations. A remote facility on Orcas Island. We have intelligence that the aggressor is unstable and armed. I am the only person he has agreed to speak with. If I am not there, people will get hurt. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. It was there, a tiny crack in his procedural armor. But then it was gone, sealed over by that hard, impenetrable expression. Sounds like a convenient story. Turn around. I turned, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and fear, and placed my hands on the rain-slicked roof of my car. I felt the cold, metallic bite of handcuffs as they snapped around my wrists. Disbelief washed over me, so potent it was nauseating. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not with Ivan's life on the line. You always did think your rules were the only ones that mattered, Mikhail said, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it over the rain. Always the star. Always the one who knew best. And in that moment, under the flashing lights on a lonely stretch of highway, I understood. This had nothing to do with me speeding. This had nothing to do with the law. This was the culmination of every report card, every promotion, every time he had felt small in my shadow. This was his chance, in his world, on his terms, to finally put me in my place. "This is not the time or the place for our issues, Mikhail," I said through gritted teeth. "A young man's life is at stake." "National security, is it?" he said, the words dripping with sarcasm as he patted me down in a perfunctory search. He turned me around to face him. The rain had plastered his hair to his forehead, and his eyes, the same shade of hazel as mine, looked haunted. "I'm going to search your vehicle now," he said, the professional mask firmly back in place. "You need a warrant for that," I said, the lawyer in me speaking automatically. "Not with probable cause. You're driving recklessly, claiming to be on a secret mission involving a hostage. For all I know, you're the one who kidnapped him. That car could be full of anything. I need to secure the scene." It was a twisted, but technically defensible, piece of logic. He was building his case, protecting himself. The situation was spiraling. I needed to get word to my team. "I need to make a phone call," I said. "My team is waiting for me." "You can make all the calls you want from a holding cell at the station," he said, guiding me toward the back of his patrol car. "The station?" I balked. "Mikhail, there is no time. Call my office. Call the goddamn governor if you have to. They will verify everything." He wasn't listening. He placed me in the back of his car, the plastic seat cold and hard, and slammed the door. Through the wire mesh divider, I watched him walk back to my car. He opened the door and began to rifle through my briefcase, pulling out the sealed, confidential file on the TerraGen case, my secure satellite phone, my laptop. Each minute that ticked by was a minute stolen from Ivan Volkov. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, fighting the panic that was clawing at my throat. This was a nightmare, a collision of worlds I had always kept so carefully separate. I heard him on his radio, his voice crackling. "Dispatch, this is 7 Adam 12. I have a suspicious vehicle, possible suspect in custody. Subject is claiming a sensitive status, but is uncooperative. Requesting backup." Backup. He was escalating this from a personal vendetta to a full-blown departmental incident. If more officers arrived, it would create a scene, a roadblock, a delay that could be fatal. All because my brother couldn't see past his own wounded pride to do the right thing. The next 20 minutes were a form of exquisite torture. Handcuffed in the back of Mikhail's patrol car, I watched as my life's work was laid out on the hood of my sedan like contraband. The confidential TerraGen file, its pages fluttering in the wind and rain. My satellite phone, now bagged as evidence. 2 more patrol cars arrived, their tires crunching on the gravel, adding their lights to the chaotic scene. A deputy I didn't recognize, younger than Mikhail, approached him. "Sarge? What VA we got?" "Suspicious driver," Mikhail said, his voice loud enough for me to hear. "Claims to be some kind of high-powered negotiator on a secret mission. Refused to cooperate. He didn't mention that I was his sister. He was playing this by a book of his own invention." "That's Anya Petrova," the young deputy said, peering at me through the window. "My wife's an architect. She follows all those big Seattle firms. Ms. Petrova is a partner at Petrova and Sterling. She's the real deal." Mikhail shot him a look that could have frozen water. "And I'm treating her as such. By the book." My satellite phone began to ring from inside its evidence bag. It was Sterling, my partner, undoubtedly wondering where I was. The plan had been for me to check in the moment I boarded the ferry. Mikhail glanced at the ringing phone, then deliberately ignored it. "Mikhail, that's my partner," I shouted through the thick glass. Answering that phone could save a life. "The aggressor is expecting my call." Our eyes met through the rain-streaked window. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy I grew up with, the brother who once pushed me on a swing. Then his police radio crackled to life, an alert tone cutting through the static. "All units in Cedar Creek County, be advised. We have a request for situational awareness from the state police. A private firm, Petrova and Sterling, is managing a developing hostage situation at a TerraGen facility on Orcas Island. Subject is male, armed, and unstable. The situation is considered extremely volatile. All local LE are advised to stand clear unless direct assistance is requested by the firm's representatives on site. The voice on the radio confirmed everything I had been desperately trying to tell him. The air in the car grew thick and still. I watched Mikhail's back, waiting for him to turn, to unlock the door, to admit his catastrophic error. Instead, he reached into his car and turned the radio's volume down. He continued his methodical, pointless search of my car. "Mikhail, you just heard it," I yelled, my voice hoarse. "That is the situation. I am the firm's representative." The young deputy approached him again, his expression deeply troubled. "Sarge, that call. This has to be related. Maybe we should." "She claims it is," Mikhail cut him off, his voice tight. "But protocol is protocol. We don't release potential suspects based on a radio broadcast." "Suspects?" The word was a slap in the face. The absurdity was dizzying. I leaned my head back against the hard plastic seat, forcing myself to find a center in the swirling chaos. Getting hysterical wouldn't help Ivan Volkov. I needed to think. My satellite phone rang again. And again. Each unanswered call was a stab of failure. Through the windshield, I saw another vehicle approaching, not a patrol car. A large, dark SUV, the kind my firm used. My backup team, tracking my GPS, had come looking for me. A wave of relief washed over me, but it crashed and died on the shore of Mikhail's obstinacy. He held up a hand, directing the SUV to stop 100 yards back, creating a perimeter, trapping me in this bubble of his making. The radio crackled again. "All units at the Highway 2 incident, be advised, Sheriff Kaplan is en route to your location. ETA 5 minutes. At the mention of his superior's name, Mikhail's posture stiffened. Sheriff Kaplan was a 20-year veteran, a man known for his calm demeanor and his absolute intolerance for cowboys who didn't follow the rules. A tiny, grim smile touched my lips. The curtain was about to fall on Mikhail's one-act play. The minutes stretched into an eternity. My team was stuck down the road. I was stuck in the back of this car. My phone continued its futile ringing. Finally, a new set of headlights cut through the rain, and a vehicle with the sheriff's insignia pulled up. A tall, graying man stepped out, his face set in a grim line as he surveyed the scene. For patrol cars, my sedan with its contents exposed to the elements, and me, a cuffed woman in the back of a squad car. "Sergeant Petrova." Sheriff Kaplan's voice was a low boom that carried easily over the rain. "Give me a status report. What in God's name is going on here?" Mikhail snapped to attention. "Traffic stop, sir. Driver was operating her vehicle recklessly. Claims to be a crisis negotiator on an urgent mission. I am verifying her identity and securing the scene." Kaplan's gaze swept the scene, his eyes narrowing as they landed on me. He walked closer to the car, peering through the window. I met his gaze directly, trying to project every ounce of authority and urgency I possessed. The color drained from his face. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," he breathed. He turned on Mikhail, his expression a storm of disbelief and fury. "Petrova, is this who I think it is?" "Subject claims to be Anya Petrova, sir," Mikhail said, clinging to his procedural language like a life raft. "I'm in the process of—" "Open this door," Kaplan commanded, his voice deadly quiet. "Right now." Mikhail fumbled for a moment. "Sir, protocol." I said, "Open the damn door." Kaplan roared, and the other deputies took a reflexive step back. Mikhail obeyed, his movements stiff. Kaplan leaned in, his eyes full of a horrified recognition. "Ma'am," he said, the word catching in his throat. "From Petrova and Sterling?" "Yes, Sheriff," I said, my voice tight but level. "And I would appreciate it if you would instruct your deputy to remove these cuffs. I am 45 minutes behind schedule for a hostage negotiation, and that delay may have already cost a young man his life." Kaplan spun on Mikhail. "Get them off her. Now." Mikhail's face was ashen. The reality of his actions was crashing down on him in a tidal wave. As he leaned in with the key, our eyes met. I saw it all there. The dawning horror, the professional terror, the personal shame. The cuffs fell away. I rubbed my raw wrists, stepping out of the car and pulling my soaked blazer around me with as much dignity as I could muster. Sheriff Kaplan immediately came to a position of attention. Ms. Petrova, on behalf of my department, I offer my most profound apologies for this inexcusable incident. Any assistance we can provide, you have it. I straightened my shoulders. As a matter of fact, you can. The target facility is on Orcas Island. The last ferry is in 40 minutes. I need an escort. Lights and siren. Now. Of course, ma'am. Right away. He turned to the other deputies. Clear this scene. Get a lead car ready for an escort. He then rounded on Mikhail, his voice dropping to a furious whisper. Petrova, gather every single one of Ms. Petrova's belongings. Now. Then you will report back to the station and you will wait for me in my office. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, Mikhail whispered, his face chalky. He moved like a robot, collecting my papers, my phone, my laptop. His hands trembled as he handed them to me. Anya, Not now, I cut him off, my voice like ice. There isn't time. I strode to my car, got in, and immediately dialed Sterling. Anya. My God, what happened? We tracked your car to a dead stop on the highway. Jurisdictional friction, I said curtly. I'm back on the move with a police escort. What's the status of the package? I used our code for the hostage. Agitated, Sterling replied. The aggressor, a man named Grigory Volkov, the founder's estranged brother, is getting spooked. He was expecting your call 30 minutes ago. He's threatening to destroy the prototype. Tell him I was unavoidably detained, and I am 5 minutes from the ferry. Tell him I'm coming. Hold him on the line. I ended the call and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw Mikhail standing alone by his patrol car, a solitary, diminished figure watching me go. The part of me that was a crisis negotiator felt a cold, professional fury at the damage he had done. The part of me that was a lawyer calculated the legal and professional ramifications for him. But the smallest part of me, the part that was still his little sister, felt a hollow ache. He had just set fire to his own career, and for what? To feel powerful for 20 minutes? The police escort screamed to life, and I floored the accelerator, falling in behind them. I pushed all thoughts of Mikhail from my mind. Grigory and Ivan Volkov were all that mattered now. The clock was ticking, louder and more menacing than ever, and thanks to my brother, we were almost out of time. The R&D facility was a modern structure of glass and cedar, perched on a bluff overlooking the churning, slate-gray water of the Sound. It should have been a place of quiet innovation. Tonight, it was a pressure cooker. Sterling met me at the makeshift command post we'd set up in a neighboring guest house. He's on edge, Anya. The delay has him convinced this is a trap. Where is he? Where is Ivan? Sterling pointed to a thermal image on a tablet. Main lab. Grigory has Ivan tied to a chair next to the prototype housing. He's armed with a handgun, and he claims to have wired the prototype with an accelerant. One spark, and a decade of research goes up in smoke. I took a deep breath, pushing aside the lingering adrenaline from my encounter with Mikhail. That woman, angry, humiliated, betrayed, could not enter the negotiation. She had to be replaced by the calm, empathetic professional. Patch me through, I said. Video call. I want him to see my face. A moment later, Grigory Volkov's face appeared on the screen. He was a man in his late 40s, his face a mask of sweat and desperation. In the background, I could see Ivan, pale but defiant. You're late, Grigory snarled. I knew it. You were calling the cops. My name is Anya Petrova, Grigory, I said, my voice calm and even. I was delayed by a local deputy who didn't understand the situation. No one else is involved. It's just you and me talking now. I'm here to listen. I deliberately held up my hands, showing they were empty. No tricks. No surprises. My shoulder throbbed with a dull ache where the handcuff had dug in. I used the faint pain to ground myself. Listen? It's too late for listening, he shouted. My brother, Dmitri, he listened for years and then he stole everything. Teragen was my idea, my concept. He pushed me out with a pittance while he became a visionary. This was the core of it. Not greed, but grievance. A story as old as time. Cain and Abel, but with patents instead of pastures. Tell me about it, Grigory, I said softly. Tell me about your idea. For the next hour, I didn't negotiate. I listened. I listened as he poured out a story of betrayal, of being the dreamer while his brother was the pragmatist who turned the dream into a business and cut him out. My own fraught history with Mikhail echoed in his words, a painful, unexpected resonance. I understood the sting of feeling like the less valued sibling, the one whose contributions were dismissed. He built his empire on my back, Grigory said, his voice cracking. And all I want is what's mine. I understand that, Grigory, I said, and for the first time, I felt I truly did. I understand feeling that your life's work has been misunderstood or undervalued. But what you're doing now, this isn't the way to be heard. It's just creating more pain. I glanced at Ivan, who was watching me, his eyes wide. Think about your nephew, Grigory. This isn't his fault. He's just a boy. He's a Volkov. Grigory spat. He's part of the empire. He's also the boy you taught to sail, I said, reciting a piece of intel my team had gathered. You took him out on the Sound when he was 10. You taught him how to read the tides. That man, the man who loved his nephew, is the one I'm talking to. I saw a flicker of conflict in his eyes. The same flicker I had seen in Mikhail's. The battle between the wound and the better self. Let Ivan go, Grigory, I urged. Let him walk out. And then you and I will sit down with your brother's lawyers. Not as a hostage-taker, but as a co-founder with a legitimate grievance. I will personally mediate. I will make them listen. That is my promise to you. He was wavering. The hand holding the gun was trembling. It's over, Grigory, I said gently. You can end this now with your dignity intact. He stared at the screen for a long, silent moment. Then, with a choked sob, he lowered the gun. Okay, he whispered. Okay. He slowly untied Ivan. My team, listening to every word, moved in silently the moment Ivan was clear. There was no violence. Just the quiet, weary click of handcuffs, a sound that now sent a shiver down my spine as Grigory surrendered. I stepped outside into the pre-dawn air, the rain having softened to a fine mist. The crisis was over. As the relief washed over me, it was followed by a wave of bone-deep exhaustion. Sterling clapped me on the shoulder. I don't know how you do it, Anya. You saved that company. You saved that kid. I just nodded, my gaze fixed on the gray light breaking over the water. I had saved them. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else, something closer to home, was still badly broken. 3 days later, I sat in my parents' quiet living room, the scent of cedar and lemon oil polish in the air. A sling, prescribed more for rest than necessity, supported my arm, a visible symbol of the week's chaos. I had told them a sanitized version of the story, focusing on the successful negotiation, omitting the part about their son handcuffing their daughter on the side of a highway. But they knew Mikhail had been suspended. In a small town, news like that travels fast. The doorbell rang. My mother's shoulders tensed. A few moments later, Mikhail stood in the doorway of the living room. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The rigid authority was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out weariness. He saw the sling on my arm, and his face paled. You were hurt. It's nothing, I said. A sprain from a fall. It happened after I was finally allowed to get to my destination. The accusation was gentle, but it landed with the force of a physical blow. He flinched and looked away, sinking into the armchair Dad had built years ago. A tense, heavy silence filled the room. Internal Affairs is recommending a 6-month suspension and a permanent demotion to patrol duty, he said to the floor. Kaplan fought to keep me from being fired outright. The union is backing him. He ran a hand through his hair. My career as a sergeant, as a detective in training, it's over. I felt a pang of something that wasn't pity, but a deep, familial sorrow. I'm sorry to hear that, Mikhail. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of a raw, desperate question. Why didn't you file a complaint? Kaplan told me you refused to give a formal statement against me. You could have ended my career. Why? Because I knew it wasn't about your career, I said, leaning forward. Just like it wasn't about me speeding. This was about us. It was about report cards on the fridge and different paths and 1,000 tiny things that built a wall between us. Am I wrong? He shook his head, his throat working. No, he whispered. You're not wrong. Mikhail, What were you thinking? Our mother asked, her voice trembling. He finally looked at our parents, the years of resentment seeming to spill out of him. I was thinking that she always wins, he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. Everything she touches turns to gold. The perfect grades, the fancy schools, the big shot career. And every time she'd come home, it was like a spotlight was on her and I was just in the shadow. Dad, your workshop was the only place I felt like I was better at something. And Mom, her books and her words. I could never keep up. Our father, a man of few words, looked stricken. Son, that was never our intention. We were proud of both of you for different things. But you compared us, Mikhail insisted, his voice cracking. Not with words, maybe, but with the way you looked at us. The way you celebrated her wins and just accepted my path. Like it was second best. That doesn't justify what you did, I said softly but firmly. You chose to put your resentment ahead of a person's life, Mikhail. You chose to abuse your power. That choice has consequences that go far beyond our family. I know, he said, his face crumpling. He buried his face in his hands. God, I know. When I heard that dispatch call, when I realized it was all true, it was like the ground fell out from under me. I've been a good cop, Anya. A good deputy. I've saved people. I've done good work. But all anyone will ever remember is this. The night I arrested my own sister out of spite. The raw honesty of his confession broke something open in the room. The unspoken things were finally being spoken. Maybe we all have things to answer for, Dad said quietly, his gaze moving between us. Maybe we didn't know how to celebrate two different kinds of success equally. Maybe we made a competition where there shouldn't have been one. Mikhail looked up from his hands. I'm seeing someone, he said. A therapist. The department is making me. But I would have gone anyway. I need to figure out why I let that bitterness take root. It was the most vulnerable thing I had ever heard him say. He turned to me, his eyes clear for the first time. I am so sorry, Anya. Not just for that night. For all of it. For every sarcastic comment, for every time I made you feel like you had to apologize for being brilliant. I'm sorry. The apology landed in my heart, finding a place that had been hollow for a long time. Thank you, I said, my own voice thick. But you need to understand, Mikhail. Forgiveness is one thing. Trust is another. You broke my trust, not just as a sister, but as a professional. That's going to take a long time to rebuild. I know, he said, nodding. I'll do the work. I promise. We sat there, the four of us, in the wreckage of our family's unspoken truths. It was not a tidy resolution. There were no hugs, no easy absolution. But for the first time in a very long time, the wall between us had a crack in it. It wasn't an ending. It was a difficult, painful, and necessary beginning. It was the first step on a long road back, not to what we were, but to what we could become. 6 months later, the scar on my wrist from the handcuff had faded to a faint white line, a subtle reminder. Mikhail served his suspension, returning to the department as a patrol deputy. He worked the quiet night shifts in the county's eastern sector, a humbling reset for a man who had been a respected sergeant. We had started talking. Tentatively at first, with weekly phone calls that were often stilted and awkward. We talked about the weather, our parents, his new patrol route. We didn't talk about that night, but its presence was in every careful word, every long pause. Slowly, a new dynamic began to emerge, one built not on assumption and rivalry, but on a conscious, deliberate effort to understand. Today, I was back in Washington, giving the keynote address at a statewide symposium on conflict resolution. The invitation was a direct result of the Tara Jen case, which had become a textbook example of nonviolent de-escalation. I had sent Mikhail an invitation, not expecting him to come. As I stepped to the podium, I scanned the audience of academics, law enforcement officers, and therapists. And there he was, in the back row, wearing his uniform, his hat resting on his knee. He looked tired, but at peace. Our eyes met, and he gave me a small, slow nod. I took a breath and began. We often speak of conflict as a battle to be won, I said, my voice filling the auditorium. We talk about leverage, about power dynamics, about gaining the upper hand. But my experience has taught me that true, lasting resolution rarely comes from a position of dominance. It comes from a place of radical empathy. It comes from finding the shared humanity in the person sitting across the table or on the other side of a barricade. I spoke for 40 minutes about the psychology of grievance, about the importance of listening, about building bridges over the chasms of anger and fear. I didn't mention Grigory Volkov by name, but his story, and in a way, Mikhail's, was woven into every word. The most profound barriers we face, I concluded, looking toward the back of the room, are not the ones in front of us. They're the ones inside of us. The resentments we nurture, the stories we tell ourselves about our own victimhood, the walls we build to protect our wounded pride. And the hardest, most courageous act of negotiation is not with an adversary, but with ourselves. It's choosing to tear down those walls and step into the vulnerable, open space where healing can begin. The applause was warm and sustained. Afterward, as people mingled, Mikhail made his way toward me. He stood before me, a little awkwardly, the hum of the crowd a buffer around us. "That was a good speech," he said. "Thank you for coming," I replied. He looked down at his hat, turning the brim in his hands. "That part at the end, about the walls we build inside. You weren't just talking about the bad guys, were you?" "No," I said softly. "I wasn't." A fragile understanding passed between us, more powerful than any apology. "I've been thinking," he said, changing the subject, "about maybe going back to school. Getting a degree in forestry management or something. A different way to protect the land. Less authority. More stewardship." "I think you'd be great at that, Mikhail," I said, and I meant it. It sounded like a path he was choosing for himself, not one he was settling for. "Anyway," he said, clearing his throat, "Mom and Dad are expecting you for dinner. Try not to speed on your way over." A genuine smile broke across my face, and I saw an echo of it on his. It was the first time either of us had joked about that night. It was a small thing, but it felt enormous. "I'll do my best," I promised. As I drove toward our parents' house, with the setting sun painting the Cascade Peaks in hues of orange and rose, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The relationship I had with my brother would never be simple. The ghosts of our past would always be there. But we were no longer defined by them. We were learning to be family in a new way, a way that was quieter, more honest, and infinitely more resilient. The old structure, built on a faulty foundation of rivalry and misunderstanding, had collapsed. But in its place, we were slowly, carefully, building something new. Something we could both touch. Something that might just last.